I'd like to begin with Mr. Hassan Bakshi, Chairman of Abad. As your website says, Abad has more than 900 members. Would you know how many of these are actually small and medium enterprises?
Yes, we have more than 900 members, and one thing I would like to admit here, and I think most of the people sitting here would agree with me, most of the construction activity throughout in Pakistan is being taken place in Karachi. And this is how our membership is also like that. 80% of our members or 70% of our members are from Karachi. And out of that 900 members, maybe 30% members are private limited companies, or 30 members, sorry, not 30%, or private limited companies or corporate companies. Rest, all of them are, I would say, SMEs in terms of doing business. And I would call them SMEs because they do not have those good balance sheets. They've been working with the conventional methods, but if you see the capital involved in this industry, if you construct a building in Karachi, a city like Karachi, the average value of 1,000 yards plot is between 500 to 700 million. None of the bank and the bankers sitting here do finance that activity. As said earlier by a few people, we get 2-4 people together, we finance the plot, we buy the plot, and then through advance sales, we construct the buildings. I would like to add one more thing here. Why the builder has not been able to perform all these years? People very senior, and I've worked with honor of working with Mr. Zegan. He's a very seasoned person, but he was working with Nawaz Sharif as well. He was working with Nawaz Sharif for 5 years, and as he himself said, he had one meeting. He was working with HBFC for so many years, but as he said, HBFC is delivering 1 or 2 loans per day in comparison to Indian companies which are giving 1,000 loans a day. So why has these people failed? These people have failed, I think, because never the government has given priority to housing. So many people are sitting here. I would like to know what is the name of the housing minister in Sindh? The city, city where the province where Karachi lies, and where there is vibrancy, where there are 700 projects going on. Who is the housing minister? None. Who was the federal housing minister in the previous government? Mr. Durrani. He was from PML, I think, Fazlur Rahman Group. He was not interested in that subject. So what I am trying to say, I'm sorry to say, but only builders are being made the punching bags. Let's see how these senior people, why these senior people fail? Because there is no focus. Yes, the builders and developers have working in this industry in 30-40 years. This is our second generation, and they are now in a position to come up with big projects. Why we are not moving in the affordable housing? I'll tell you the reason. Because to develop an affordable housing, I can develop a high-end apartment on a 2,000 square yard plot, where the apartment would be sold for 50 million each, thereby making my profits as well, and the customer would be having cash in their pockets. But if I want to go and construct a project for affordable housing, I need 100 acres of land. For that, clear title of lands are not easily available in the outskirts of the city, because since last 20-30 years, government is using land as a product to oblige people. They are not auctioning the land, they are not giving it to the developers. They are not giving it to the builders, but they are allotting the land to the front people. When the land is allotted to them for 1,000, I'm just quoting an example, 1,000 rupees per square yard, and these people pay 20% of that 1,200 rupees per square yard, and a developer like me is able to get the same land for 20,000 rupees per yard. So where do we get the affordable housing? And once we start constructing on that, then the government changes, NAP comes into action, and that whole project is stopped. So most of the activity is being done in those areas which were developed 30, 40, 50 years, and there are no title issues. So if you increase financing for affordable housing or construction industry, that will transform the industry. But in addition to that, you need to ensure that proper clean title land is available for the developers. Fast, it takes 3 years for approval. Who is going to invest when it takes 3 years for approval? The approval time should be limited to 30 days. We are taking party to a group of ministers, the officers who are heading the regulatory authority to Dubai, to Malaysia, and to Singapore, how their approvals are being done. Then, if you intend builders to go and develop in far-flung, outside the city, main city, urban areas, then where is the infrastructure? There are no roads, there are no schools, there are no hospitals, there are no police stations, there is no transport available. So then, if you want builders to come up with good books, then we need to have one valuation in Pakistan. There is one valuation which is DC rates. For instance, if I buy a plot, the DC rates are maybe 30 million. The federal government rates are 100 million, and I've actually bought the land for maybe 800 millions. So this needs to be improved for us to work properly, and I think fixed tax regime, which was introduced by Nawaz Sharif government, was the right solution. You have to bring these SME sectors to the formal sector. You need to give them the space the same way stock exchange was given space. These are the players who are working, who are delivering with their own money or money raised from the market. Few people, when I speak to them, they say the interest rates has gone up high and we will not be able to take loans. The people will not be able to take loans. I feel if the supply increases, the value of the finished unit is going to come down by 20 to 25%. Since it takes 3 years for approval, I know my next project will take 3 more years. I sell it slowly. So this 1 or 2% increase in interest certainly but will not have such a huge effect if the supply is easy and it's in higher number.
So Mr. Bakshi, if I may interject here, there's a range of issues,
yes,
and the housing sector needs to be looked at from various contexts, including regulatory but focusing on the financial aspect.
Yes.
In your opinion, what is it that Abad can do to help the sector towards formalization? Because that's one of the key issues that the banks face in being able to provide financing. So, in your opinion, what are some of the initiatives that Abad can undertake?
Abad can undertake various initiatives with the help of the federal and provincial government. First of all, there is one problem which somebody, Khizr mentioned, I feel. There are 2-3 books we are maintaining, that is correct. For that, we need to have fixed income tax introduced in our business. We need to have one valuation of property which is market based. Then if we are able to, come up with that, I have approached PACRA and I have approached JCRS that we are ready for grading. Because we as an industry, I think we should move in that direction. Because in the times of what has happened since 50 years will not be happening in the next 5 years. Because I am working with the Prime Minister Task Force as well, and I see a rapid change in this business. And technology will be coming in. Zagan Saab said, why did not builders brought in technology? Technology turns in millions of square feet in 1 year. What are we going to do with those industries and technologies when there are no approvals? Try to understand. We have to fix it. It cannot be just builder. We cannot work in isolation. We cannot improve in isolation. The government helped brokerage houses to come to that level. Go back 10, 15 years. What was Arif Habib? And see what is Arif Habib now. Because government and World Bank and other institutions help them to transform. So what we feel, we are mature enough. We are ready. We are mentally ready. Now more educated people are coming into this field. And our next generation, most of them are foreign qualified and they want to do work in a corporate good environment. But if you think only we can do it, we have to pay millions of rupees for approval. We have been taken care by the local SHOs. We have been taken care of the local political party mafias. So where is the state? We don't sit in this kind of atmosphere where the temperature is controlled to 16 or 18 degrees. We work in open field. So please, I would like all of us to appreciate those. My former chairman was shot dead. Then my previous former chairman was kidnapped for 30 days. So we still work in that environment. We don't work from the offices. I know so many people in Karachi, because I talk about Karachi because Karachi is where things move. We used to park our cars somewhere else 4 years back. Now things have improved a lot. And then we used to go to our sites in smaller cars. We used to park our SUVs somewhere else and take smaller cars. Why? Because we were targeted. Where were the law enforcement agencies? Where were they now? Where were the law enforcement agencies? Where were the so-called politicians? Where were the bureaucrats? Where were the other people? There was nowhere to be seen. It is we who faced all these situations and are proud that we are still working in Pakistan and delivering it. Abad and members of Abad is the only association which is delivering more than 100,000 formal housing in Pakistan. Go to Karachi, go to Lahore, all the buildings you see is being constructed by the local developers. So I think we should all understand that, and yes, there might be some challenges in our industry as well. People have not performed, but that is everywhere. You cannot pinpoint few failures and bring the industry on the back foot. We all should understand nobody is going to come to Pakistan, it is we who is going to deliver, we all Pakistanis. If we are delivering, then everybody would like to become part of the prosperity and development. So we should encourage not only our industry, we should encourage whoever is playing, we should encourage people like Karandaaz. This is a very positive initiative you have taken. So many years, nobody had spoken about this. Although, I think marginally 1 or 2% must be having financing from the bank. Why don't we go to the banks for financing? Yes, books is one of the issue, but the other issue, we are ready to pay our formal partners maybe 1.5 to 2% per month, but we are not ready to pay banks 10%. Why? Somebody has to think that way as well, because a lot of documentation is required, and since long we are not used to that. Let us agree, okay, slowly and gradually the banks will help, people like you will help. Zegam Saab is fighting our case with the bureaucracy, I would say, and fortunately this time we have a Prime Minister who understands the importance of housing, and he is keen. Maybe we as a task force is not moving at the pace which Imran Khan used to bowl when he was young. He was a fast bowler, but we are moving in the right direction. I am sure that this task force given due empowerment, yes, which is given, but and acknowledged by the bureaucracy as well. Because now we don't feel, as far as federal government is concerned, difficulties are from the federal government. Yes, bureaucracy is a mindset which we need to overcome. And yes, some provincial setups as well. Since we are facing a lot of difficulties, but what I feel and I always say, if say Karachi moves, the whole Pakistan moves. And this I would like to say. And yes, whatever the shortcomings, together we'll try to come up. We'll try to make up for our shortcomings, but help us to make up. It's very easy to just blame the construction industry for what has failed. But see what we have delivered as well in the given circumstances. This is what I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Bakshi Saab. I think Abad's role is, sort of very well recognized with delivering 100,000 houses to Pakistan. I think the role cannot be downplayed, and we hope to see that it will be further expanded and scaled up. Jawad, coming to you, could you tell us, for the benefit of the audience, about the Ansar Management Company, the models for low-cost housing that you have introduced in Pakistan, and what has worked so far and what has maybe not worked so far?
Thank you, Meher. So Ansar Management Company was started in 2009. The initial funding came from Acumen, and we started a project in Lahore, which was 100 acres and intended to be 3,000 units. Along the way, the local Patwari came and said, we're going to block the road. If you give us 15 lakh rupees, we'll solve the problem. So we stood our ground. We said we're not going to pay the 15 lakh rupees. So our project went to self-destruct mode. Luckily, we had investors who understood the principles we were trying to stand by, and they stood by us for a few years. During that time, we were able to show different parts of our model that I'll speak to in a minute. And when we were able to demonstrate our different parts of what we think our model is going to be and how affordable housing should work in this country, we found other investors that understood what we're doing. And in 2013, we had 2 UK investors buy out Acumen's share at a profit. So it was one of their first successful exits globally as a fund, as a social venture capital fund. And now currently we have about 1.5 billion rupees invested in Pakistan, and that money is for a pipeline of roughly 5,000 units, and we are doing homes that are ranging between 10 lakh rupees and 16 lakh rupees per unit. The model basically we have works as this. We buy a piece of land, we dedicate 60% of the land for built up units, and we leave 40% for plots. The 60% that we leave for units, we build them immediately, and we require them to occupy it immediately as well. They cannot sell it, rent it, or leave it empty for a period of 5 years, which allows us to occupy it immediately. And once that happens, and we sell it at cost or near cost, the profit margin there is not more than 5%. When in an instant where you have 1,000 units, 600 units are occupied, then the remaining 400 plots value appreciates. And the aggregate return on that we get on the model or the project is somewhere between 10 and 15% annualized return. And we carry out everything from land acquisition all the way through to not just handing the keys over through a mortgage which is provided by HBFC, but also we stay there for a period of 5 years to help with the community development. Because the 2 essential aspects that was touched upon before that is important for affordable housing is how do you avoid ghost towns, which I talked about, and the second is how do you avoid ghettos. And if we don't have a mechanism to avoid ghettos, then you're actually contributing to the problem rather than providing a solution.
Very interesting, thank you. And in your opinion, where can the financial sector step in to help scale up this initiative even further?
All of our investment has been foreign investment, and the reason for that is not because we're particularly skilled in getting foreign investment, but because there's no local investment available. So in the case of, there's two types of investment we need. One is what we're talking about here is builder finance, and second is the end user finance. And so the absence, we as AMC have gone to every single bank possible, microfinance, also commercial bank, and nobody's interested in providing end user finance for this income segment, although everybody acknowledges that this is a more reliable segment to repay. But in the case of microfinance, the problem is that the interest rate is, at best, it'll come down to 20%. And that product doesn't work. And when we come to the mainstream banks, right now we're facing a problem which I think Ali didn't really touch upon as well, which is how are we going to manage the fact that we have a 6.5% or 8% interest rate with our clients right now with HBFC. That's what we signed on a year ago. And now the interest rate is 12%. And how do we manage that for the end user? So this concept of some sort of fixed rate interest rate for the end user is what we need to be looking at this stage, given where we stand as the economy. So both of these aspects are required. One is the SME financing, which again, Bakshi Sahib has touched upon. No bank is willing to get close to that, and that's why this effort is really important. And the second is the end user financing. If we don't have good end user financing in place, with the fluctuation of the KIBOR, even if we provide a product, nobody's want to get close to it at all. So that's the challenge.
That brings me to you, Namus. The World Bank has been very, very involved with setting up the PMRC along with the State Bank. So can you tell me about where the PMRC is at this point in time, and sort of whether banks are beginning to interact with the PMRC?
Sure. Thank you. Firstly, I'm very happy to be the only woman on the panel. Next time I would advise more general equality. I have to say that my World Bank gender speak. So I think one thing that's clear is that the housing ecosystem is a very, very complex ecosystem. And we've touched on issues across the spectrum. We've talked about the supply of housing, which deals with the land titling and all of those kind of issues, all the way to the demand of housing, which is where the World Bank, me and my urban colleagues are working on the upstream side, on the land titling. The Punjab project is actually a World Bank project. And right now, we're actually now trying to move very, very downstream to the actual demand for housing, which is where our engagement with PMRC comes in. So historically, banks have been very, very reluctant to move in this space. One of the issues that has been raised in other conversations is around foreclosure law. Pakistan did not have a foreclosure law which was very conducive to banks moving into this space. That law was amended a few years ago. Then there was a stay order on that law because someone tried to exercise it without the underlying rules and regulations. I'm happy to report now that stay order has also been removed. So Pakistan now has a foreclosure law which both the debtors and creditors are happy with. So we do believe that this will give the banks some comfort to move into this space. Having said that, it is not just the foreclosure issues which are an issue for the banks. As someone else also highlighted, firstly, we have very limited primary market mortgages in Pakistan. I think 60,000 outstanding, which is one of the lowest in the region. The reason for that is, firstly, we have an asset mismatch. A mortgage should ideally be up to 20 years. Most of the deposit base in Pakistan is current accounts, so banks cannot necessarily lend to that extent. At the same time, we don't have a very robust capital market at all. So in other countries, in India, for example, and with examples that Kamsab has said, they have a very vibrant capital market, which actually can build a long-term yield curve and also offer fixed rates, which are again very, very important. Because if you're going to get a mortgage, even if it's for 20 years, but if it's variable rates, a spike in the rates 10 years down the line, you won't be able to, affordability just goes out of the window. So the role of the Pakistan Mortgage Refinance Company is basically that. It will firstly build the longer term. It will refinance banks for the longer term, so that if a bank can maybe say lend up to 8 years, they will refinance the rest of the portion, so you can get a 20-year mortgage, ideally. Secondly, and because they will be accessing the capital markets, we hope that they can put some fixed rate discipline into the mortgages. So basically, the aim is to give the banks the comfort. Now that you have the foreclosure law, now you also have some long-term liquidity in order for you to give primary mortgages. So that is basically the model, and I have to say, I have to commend the government of Pakistan and the State Bank. They have been very, very supportive of these institutions. Any concessions, tax concessions, whatever were required, the government has been very forthcoming with them. The World Bank loan is to the Ministry of Finance, and the Ministry of Finance has then on-lent to the Pakistan Mortgage Refinance Company, where the government has 30% stake, but is primarily owned by the commercial banks. Again, the government has been very generous in their on-lending. It has been on this was an IDA loan, and the terms of the IDA loan have been passed on, and the currency risk is actually being borne by the government. So we need to commend the fact that the government is very, very interested in this. Having said that, Pakistan Mortgage Refinance Company will not necessarily go that downstream, because banks initially, when they move into the mortgage markets, they will want to go to the middle or upper income stratas, obviously. So part of our project is also we are designing a risk-sharing facility where we hope to leverage it up to about $100 million to go very down market to build the capacity of banks to actually give mortgages to the informal sector, because the informal sector mortgage is a very different mortgage. The cash flow mechanisms are very, very different. They don't have salary slips. We need to, so while we can give them a credit enhancement facility, they also need to have the capacity to design mortgages for the Faluda wala or the Jalebi wala, which is a very different kind of a model. So the PMRC is also kind of leading that risk sharing facility design. So the role of PMRC is twofold. Number one, it is to actually create a primary mortgage market by giving banks some comfort, and concurrently also design mechanisms where banks can move downstream. Hopefully, we will have house building finance companies. We've seen a lot of interest. We've spoken to SCCP, house building finance companies who are traditionally the ones that will go more downstream to low income. So those are mortgages that they can benefit from. So going back to your earlier question, yes, PMRC has actually signed 4 master refinancing facilities with 4 banks. I think it's going to disperse in the next week. It's first refinancing facility. They are also designing Sharia compliant products, because we think Islamic finance is a very, very big market which needs to be tapped for mortgages. So the advent of PMRC is very, very timely, but obviously the success of PMRC depends on the primary mortgage market, because they are refinancing facilities. They're not going to give mortgages themselves. And we are very, very encouraged to see that banks have actually started moving into the space, and more importantly, there is an increasing interest for the setup of house building finance companies, because as I said, those are the ones which will really go to the low income sector.
Thank you, very, very comprehensive, and that brings me to my second question to you, which is with regards to these house building finance companies. We've seen that the NBFI segment in India is really it's boomed on the back of these house building finance companies, and Pakistan at this point in time doesn't seem to have a single one. So what do you think will change that in Pakistan? Is it something to do with the laws, or is it primarily to do with the priority sector lending that happens in India that has enabled the creation of so many of them?
So firstly, I think 2 things to keep in mind. There is a fundamental difference between the Indian financial sector and the Pakistani financial sector. Pakistani financial sector is predominantly private sector driven. India is still very, very much a public sector model, and their direct lending works because they're mostly public sector institutions. Having said that, if you look at the financial stability of Indian financial sector, their NPLs are increasingly on the high end. Systemic risk in their banking sector is actually quite acute at the moment, which is something that we want to try to avoid in Pakistan. That's why the World Bank, on principle, does not agree with directed lending, because it distorts, and because it was a variable interest rate regime. These house building finance companies also do not have a lender of last resort the way banks do. They're regulated by the SCCP. So obviously they could not survive that kind of volatility in the market. We hope now with a more kind of stable interest rate environment, with foreclosure laws which will actually help them manage their risks more effectively, and also with the advent of PMRC which will give them longer term liquidity and also potentially help them to maybe offer fixed rate mortgages, that we have an environment which is now more conducive. And I think that is quite obvious from the fact that you have, I have personally met 4 or 5 individuals that have come to us and said that they want to now actually move into this space, because you see that there is going to be, the government is also very committed. So I think the universe has conspired in a way that housing is now on everyone's radar from across the spectrum. As I said, it's a supply side and a demand side issue, and all of these little systems need to work concurrently. It's not enough to develop a primary mortgage market if you don't have the supply. So everything needs to the wheels need to churn concurrently, and I think that at this moment in time we are seeing that all the levers are moving when we expect them to, and in the way that we would hope that they did.
Okay, thank you. Ji Raza, so HPL has moved into the housing finance space, and in the Islamic from the Islamic window, this has been a rather recent shift.
Yes,
So can you give us some understanding of what caused this shift, and also what it is that you're doing?
Yeah, actually,
Sorry.
HBL recently actually launched Islamic housing finance. It used to do the conventional mortgages, but in 2017, the bank decided that we should go for Islamic housing finance, because if you look at the industry statistics, you would notice that Islamic housing finance has been the dominant side, having a constitution of around about over 45% of market share currently. So Islamic banks have been doing it for the last couple of years, and basically the social opinion of the country as a whole, they want to have Islamic finance. So especially when it comes to housing. So there has been this so the bank decided that we should start Islamic housing. So we have started in June 2018, and we plan to go aggressive. Up till now, although we have started, we've recently done some disbursements in 2019. Going forward, we are looking to expand in second-tier cities as well. Currently, we are doing in Karachi, Lahore, Islamabad, Faisalabad, and Multan. So we're looking forward, especially with the current government's focus on low-cost affordable housing, and also the overall enabling environment that has been created over the last couple of years, maybe especially with the last 1 year. So we think it's time for us to move forward. The management is very, very geared up. So we are looking forward to good business now.
And what about any kind of changes in or needs for change in the prudential regulations? Do you have any thoughts around that?
Yeah, actually, recently, if you look at the banks are very much concerned about the foreclosure laws, because that was a major risk, for the banks. So, as Bakshi Saab also mentioned, that the builders were not, banks did not finance much to the builders, mainly because of the reason that titling issues were there, and the foreclosure laws were one of the major primary concerns. And also, given the fact that there were some, banks usually shied away from financing to low-income segments. They usually used to prefer middle or upper income groups. So, in the new revised policy that is under consideration which is under the final sign-off stage by SPP, so I think they have given some regulatory relaxations where one of the areas for financing loan-to-value is now raised to 90%. So that is one area. Then there are a couple of other areas as well. So we think that this regulatory regime and regulatory guidelines that are coming up for the low income housing would help us in promoting the low cost segment of the society for affordable housing.
Ji Faisal. So HDFC has a long history in housing finance. According to your website, HDFC also offers a small builder financing facility. So can you share some details on that and what the experience of HDFC has been with regards to that particular financing product?
Okay. Thank you so much, Meher. House Building Finance Company being the only HFC of Pakistan, we have been operating since 1952. As Zegam Sahab said, he was our ex-MD, and I was very inspired when I heard him very inspirational speak, mashallah se. In fact, we are currently the only financing partner in Pakistan which is providing end user financing and builders financing. We do have a product which was launched about 10 years back in 2008, and that was meant for small builders basically. The product was launched about 10 years back. We had good response from the market, but there were two actually issues which forced us not to pursue this product too much into the market. The first one was basically our inner limitations in terms of not marketing it to the right segment. And secondly, as Bakshi Sahab said, because of that undocumented sort of economy, because builders or those thekadar sort of people, they don't maintain their books that religiously. So that was an issue which forced us not to market that product too ambitiously. But I must say, with the change in management, we had a change in management last year. We are now gearing up for more challenges under Naya Pakistan housing program as well. I must put on record, जैसे Zegam Sahab ने कहा कि we were making 2 loans a day, so that number has actually increased to 5 loans a day. So, but I can assure you, with the management in place, with the right ingredients, this number will improve manifold, inshallah. And in fact, I must say, put it on record, as Raza said, he is representing HPL, being the largest bank of Pakistan. We are largest in terms of presence, footprints, because currently we are providing financing from 48 cities. No other institution in Pakistan is providing financing with such a national footprints. So that is there, inshallah. But the biggest challenge we are facing is the low income group people, their credit assessment. Because at HBFC, you'll be amazed to listen that we have a ticket size, every ticket size of only 1.3 million. So actually that is the segment which Naya Pakistan housing program is actually aiming for. So alhamdulillah, we do have the expertise, but we are actually now gearing up to further advance our credit assessment process. Out of over 62,000 current customers, we've got a base of around 46,000. HBFC, which constitute around 75% of total borrowers, and in terms of outstanding portfolio, we have got a 16% share, which at one point in time in early 2000 was almost 100%. So we actually lost our market share, but we are coming up with a plan of next 3 years, and inshallah in next 3 years time we will be aiming for a market share of, in terms of portfolio, roughly around 20%. That's our objective for the next 3 years, and we are definitely looking forward to the support of the government as a whole. And I must agree with Hassan Bakshi Sahab, very rightly said, it has to be a collective effort. Not one, either builder or the government or the other civic agencies can actually single-handedly lead this ambition. So it has to be a collective effort. Builders are playing their role. We must appreciate in whatever circumstances. As Bakshi Sahab said, one of the chairman Abad was shot dead, one was kidnapped for ransom. So these are the ground realities. We are living in Karachi. We know कि जो economy जो move हो रही है हमारी, वो कराची उसको trigger करता है. But Karachi में we don't see the current provincial government or the previous one also having any focus towards housing finance, or as a matter of fact housing sector. So I believe with this new federal government in place, they'll definitely influence the provincial governments also to formulate their own strategy, so that they come under the main ambit of producing 5 million housing units. But as far as HBFC is concerned, I can assure you we will inshallah be grabbing a very good market share from the proposed proposition, and our core objective of financing to low and low middle income group we will inshallah be catering that, inshallah.
Okay, thank you. So Naveed, that brings me to you. I think the most important question. You've heard everybody's views, and now I think I'd like you to let the audience know about the potential role that Karandaaz capital can play in capitalizing the housing finance sector.
Mayor, first of all, thank you for having me, and also I'm very grateful that I'm part of this very learned forum. Mr. Zagam, thank you so much for your initial thoughts, and it's again very nice to hear about the government's initiatives. It's always nice to be the last person in, because you can plagiarize from everybody's thoughts. I think before I go into what Karandaaz can do and participate, which is very significant that it can, I'd like to talk about very briefly the 3 or 4 areas everybody's touched on, and that is we can learn not only from the developing countries or the emerging countries, we talk of Indonesia, India, etc., but also perhaps from the developed countries' models, because they've been through the journey and they've learned what works and what doesn't work. And in that space, of course, clearly there's a regulatory angle, and I'm glad to hear that, of course, we have reached a good place as far as the recourse to assets is concerned. But in addition to that, there are so many other avenues. For example, the tax laws. The tax laws should be in a way that they benefit not only the homeowners that create the demand side where they can go and seek demand, perhaps even afford a higher pricing if that comes through, and of course on the builder side, what benefits they can generate out of it. And then also see that before going and talking about what the funding need is, try and estimate what is it that we are trying, the nut that we are trying to crack in terms of housing finance and builder finance. There's a demand and there's a supply side. On the demand side, we just Eddie and I were speaking a while ago. We're talking about 5 million homes. It's always nice to look at things in a bite-sized way. But if 1.5 or up to 3 million is the average size of the home, we're talking of about 15 trillion rupees in terms of the total size of the demand side of financing. So if we divide it into pieces and say, fine, 50% of it needs financing, another certain percentage will be funded. So we're still talking of about, say, 1 million houses a year, about 1 trillion plus rupees on the demand side. Okay, now let's put it in perspective. Right now, the total SME financing by all formal channels is only 470 billion. Now let's think that number in. 470 billion total financing to SMEs, and we're talking of about 1 trillion plus every year, minimum. So that means we have to think wider, think of PPP structure in which public and private sector both participate, whether it's in the form of land contribution, whether it's in the form of financing. How did the other countries break this enigma? Saudi Arabia, public investment firm and fund and the government put in 10% towards assisting people in down payments, 10% towards guarantee towards the loans. That's one model to look at. US, 1930s, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae were set up, which created a last resort in terms of creating a demand in the capital markets for cleaning up the balance sheets. The PMRC initiative is very good. In terms of how much it can absorb, in terms of cleaning up the balance sheets of banks, giving them capacity, needs to be seen. So bite-sized approach, and then in that look at models which are PPP structures, not only private sector funding, but also some kind of sovereign intervention in it. Stopping there, how can Karandaaz help? Karandaaz, as Ali, our CEO, mentioned and Joanna mentioned, is a catalyst in terms of creating a market for SME finance. This fits in perfectly with our culture. There's a lot of alignment of thought, alignment of interest along this panel as well. Karandaaz has 3 major verticals in the manner of intervention in which we can contribute to the private sector and also assist the agencies in some fashion. The first is our strategic intervention. We have always been there in terms of creating that particular segment and filling the void in the financial infrastructure. PMRC is one. We've not been involved in that, but it creates a void in the financial infrastructure and ecosystem of Pakistan. Credit enhancement facilities, again a gap in the financial ecosystem which will benefit the builders and the downstream SMEs there. Second part to it. There'll be more, and we'll all think about it. The second is our credit partnerships. We have risk participation agreements with various banks, and in those risk participation agreements, we will work with the banks in the 2 or 3 financing products that are mentioned at the end of the report. Short term for small enterprise, slightly longer term for middle enterprise, working off of models that have worked in other countries. We'll be happy to support financial institutions in risk participation agreements that have an eventual objective towards developing a market in the long term and also employment generation so that it contributes to the economy. So that's a very specific objective we want. Third is our equity participation. We are very interested in working with partners who are looking to develop low-income housing schemes and see how we can participate with them in creating a structure where they're supported in going and meeting the demand that is there, both from the builder side as well as on the demand side, which is currently we have deployed about 8 billion rupees of capital in various portfolios, either through strategic, through credit, or through equity. And this is one of the primary areas where we would like to be involved in. Having said that, we would like to see additional participation with the regulators. We'd like to partner with them, see how a PPP structure can be created and we can participate in that. And also the private sector. The lead has to come from private sector, and as a development agency, we'd be very happy to do risk participation of some nature or technical assistance of some nature, which is again part of our mandate to allow them to do that. Finally, not to take too much of your time, one of the things that Karandaaz does do, and I think our colleagues from the financial sector know, is that we have an innovation challenge program under which we do invite the private sector to come in and offer ideas in a challenge fund scenario that we can then support and nurture and take forward. So to summarize, Karandaaz is a market development agency for SME finance. We would like to be in areas where employment is generated. Construction finance is a key area on both the supply side and demand side. We're happy to be involved and are involved in the developing of strategic space, in the credit space with risk participation or directed lending, and equity, wherever developers are concerned in terms of taking low-income housing projects forward, at the same time giving technical assistance in various areas.
Thank you, Ravi. That was very comprehensive. I think we're ready now to take some questions from the audience.
Just quick comments. Raza, Habib Bank, I have been in contact with the leadership of Habib Bank very recently. Arfan Foundation, Arfan has been very keen on housing, and now they are very keen to play their role. So hopefully, inshallah, we'll see HBL playing a very proactive role in the housing sector. In HDFC in 1978, Arfan Foundation was one of the main sponsors of HDFC India. So you can see that since then, and now even there is one bank which is owned by Arfan Foundation India, which is 35% of its portfolio is housing. So we expect that Arfan Foundation and Habib Bank will inshallah play a much dynamic role. Hasan Saab, you know that I have been your major advocate outside the platform of developers. I have been your supporter. लेकिन जब मैं छोटा था तो मेरे वालिद भी यही कहा करते थे, उसको देखो कितना आगे जा रहा है, उसको देखो कितना पढ़ रहा है। तो ये काम मैं आपको करता था। और एक दिन आएगा, आज हम अपने वालिद को दुआएं देते हैं, एक दिन आएगा शायद आप मुझे दुआएं देंगे इंशाअल्लाह। सर आपका तो Karandaaz remarkable job. Jawad Aslam, I have been his volunteer for the last 13-14 years. He came from States. At that time, I started working in this like Yunus in Grameen, India.
so Bangladesh. इन्होंने भी उसी कॉन्सेप्ट पे ये छोटा काम शुरू किया और कई इन्होंने खुदा की बस्तियों पे लाहौर शारदा के नज़दीक है. अभी अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह गवर्नमेंट ऑफ पंजाब, मिनिस्टर ऑफ हाउसिंग Mehmet Rashid very actively working with the AMC क्योंकि इनका मॉडल जो है ऑलरेडी वो है जो हमारी विश है 13, 14, 15 लाख वाले 9 लाख अभी मैंने देखा फैसलाबाद का प्रोजेक्ट है 9 लाख वाले घर भी इन्होंने बनाए और बड़े रिस्पेक्टेबल कम्युनिटीज बनी है. आप जाके देखें. इनफैक्ट मैं समझता हूँ कि जो कमीशन जो लाइक जिसको भी इंटरेस्ट है वो जाके देखे कि गरीब की बस्तियों इन ए वायबल एंड सस्टेनेबल मैनर जवाब साहब टाइप के लोग बना सकते हैं. अगर एक जवाब है तो वाई नॉट 4 जवाब. HPFC देखिए बात यह है कि क्योंकि अभी तो एक ही है ना, अभी इंशाल्लाह आई होप विल सी मोर हाउसिंग फाइनेंस कंपनीज और उसके लिए इस काम हो रहा है. वी आर वर्किंग विद द State Bank that housing finance companies will be promoted not with NBFI models, SECP, but DFI's model of the State Bank. Because DFI model you have more successful. The only issue we are facing is at the moment housing finance company and a DFI model needs 6 billion capital. So we are asking them to start with 2 billion and graduate it in 5-6 years to be raised to 6 billion. So we need more. Like I was saying, in India there are 90 housing finance companies. In 1988, when National Housing Bank was formed as wholly owned subsidiary of the RBI, there were only 3 housing finance companies. NHB के बनने के बाद और जो मार्केट जैसे ग्रोव इंडिया के हाउसिंग मार्केट भी पहले से ऐसे नहीं थी. लेट 80s और 90s में उसमें जो एक मोमेंटम आया. इस वक्त तो ह्यूज मोमेंटम है कि now there are 90 and Modi's program they are targeting about 120. उसमें regional housing finance companies. India is a huge country. Some are country level, some are national level. So I personally feel कि HPFC को proactive role अदा करना है और उसके लिए आपको ज़्यादा पता है क्योंकि HPFC जब तक बाकी लोग आएंगे तो मुझे लगता है HPFC की तरफ को देखेगा भी. इसलिए कि कंपेटिटर्स नहीं है ना. अभी आप जाके देखें इंडिया में डेवलपर फाइनेंस सिर्फ आप गूगल करें डेवलपर फाइनेंस में ज़्यादा आपको एडवर्टाइजमेंट यू विल सी by different banks and financial institutions attracting and motivating developers to get finance from them. यहाँ तो हम रिक्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं कि यदि कोई डेवलपर फाइनेंस शुरू हो वहाँ पे आप सिर्फ गूगल करें तो भी banks are competing with each other. So this is one of these things. And lastly, I'm grateful कि IFC था शुरू से रहा है कि हमारे साथ बहुत सपोर्ट किया. 2004 में पहली हाउसिंग फाइनेंस की स्टडी पाकिस्तान में कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव वर्ल्ड बैंक में बनाई थी. उसके बाद डिफरेंट स्टेजेस पे आई वर्क विद वर्ल्ड बैंक ऑन असाइनमेंट्स में रीजनल डेवलप की थी. बट नाउ आई सी थैंक्स टू नामूस एंड चार्ल्स कि दे आर प्रोएक्टिवली वर्किंग ऑन दैट. देयर इज अनदर फंडिंग व्हिच वाज अर्लियर विद द प्लानिंग $5 million. Now I have been working with a very kind of minister of the PSAP कि वो फंडिंग भी PM हाउसिंग प्रोग्राम की टेक्निकल असिस्टेंस में जिसमें ये सारी चीज़ें इंशाल्लाह आएंगी. So I hope and very confident that very short we will be seeing IFC playing more proactive role in the area we are talking today. Thank you very much.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank Karandaaz for conducting this seminar and bringing this issue and giving it its due importance. We have been working on the housing and real estate business for the past over 10 years, and we have been trying to bring this business into the formal sector. And it is one of the areas where we believe the problems are all well understood and people know what the solution is, but what we are missing is an integrator. Everybody knows what needs to be done, but nobody has been able to put things in a proper system so that it can be executed. And I would request World Bank or Karandaaz, because one of the deficiencies that we face in the private sector is the lack of experience in formulating policies or properly advocating the policy. Whenever a private sector goes to the government agency with an idea, the bureaucrats think there must be something hidden in their mind that why they are proposing. And it takes so long to communicate a simple concept. So we need independent agencies and independent institutions like World Bank and Karandaaz who can understand the private sector perspective and who are able to articulate issues in a proper policy language. For example, in the case of housing or real estate, we all know that this business speculation and development activities need to be segregated. The concept of speculation kills any business. It needs to be segregated. And there are very clearly identified issues. One is the issue of transfer duties and taxes, which has become a provincial subject now. And these transfer duties and taxes are very high in Pakistan. These should be brought down to 1%. In the case of Sindh government has made this policy that REITs can transfer their assets at the actual transaction value for only 1% transfer duty, or else they have to pay at the prescribed rate on the DC value. So the policy is in place. We have already executed a transaction, so it is very well understood, and I would request that Karandaaz or World Bank should advocate to other provinces that they should incorporate that policy. And may I request that as a result of this seminar, our policy suggestions should go to higher ups in the government if you feel that they were really justified. And second issue is the issue of land hoarding. I mean, in Pakistan, people just invest their liquidity into land, and as a result, we are into that vicious cycle. Because since the prices of lands are appreciating, it has become a very attractive investment. If your land value is appreciating by 25-30% every year, why would you ever even think of doing any other business? So yesterday I heard in news the government is trying to put a sin tax on cigarettes and on some other products. There should be a sin tax on holding land. I mean, land should be utilized, it should not be held as open plots. And thirdly, we have been talking about builder finance. Builders need money, and we need to understand where do they need money. So the most of the capital requirement is at the stage of land acquisition. And the state bank's guidelines for developer finance and the state bank's prudential regulation for infrastructure projects, they do not give any provision for financing of land. That's where we need capital. Once the land is acquired, construction can be financed through customer advances. So it is important that those prudential regulations and those guidelines for builder finance incorporate provision for land financing. And lastly, there has been a debate in the financial sector about the liquidity mismatch on banks' balance sheet. And it is my personal experience that Pakistan's banks' balance sheets have continuously been growing over the past 10 years or so. And with the inflation environment and the way we finance our deficits, it is likely that these balances will continue to grow. Although we have 60-70% CASA on our balance sheet, but there must be a certain percentage of that deposit which is a core deposit and which could be directed towards mortgage finance. And once the wheel comes into motion, I'm sure it will be able to refinance itself. So just to conclude, my request is very few clear policy suggestions should go to the government as a result of the seminar. And thank you once again.
Just one more quick comment.
Thank you very much. I would like to answer any of the senior bankers here. I'm representing MC Bank here, our bank has also started the house building finance, but we are focusing only the segment which has clear cash flows, proofs, salary slips and all. So that's not actually serving the purpose here. So I remember back in 2011 and 12 when State Bank, the government wants to improve the agricultural financing, they introduced SDP credit guarantee schemes. So why can't credit guarantee schemes? So why can't the government input the stake in here in order to lure the banks the state banks provide the 30 to 40% credit guarantee scheme for this purpose, for this whole purpose, to mitigate the risks. Because banks are already facing so many risks, which we have discussed in great detail. So in order to mitigate that 30-40% of the credit guarantee scheme, state banks should introduce, so that banks could, come into this.
Sorry, can I answer
Yeah,
that
that's
quickly? Yeah. So your comment is twofold. So number one, on the risk, as I said, the government is setting up a risk sharing facility for low-income households, which will cover 40% of the first loss. So that's under design, which is deciding on a mechanism where to put it, because it's a pool of money. State bank by law cannot leverage money. So we need to kind of set up a vehicle where that risk sharing, which is something I think we need to discuss offline. So that is underway, and it's being designed in a way where donors or whatever can put money into it, and it will focus on the very low income households. Now the mortgages that you speak about in the informal sector. Now in that, as I said, that is a very different design of a mortgage. The credit risk is very difficult to understand. The cash flows are very different. It's a predominantly an informal sector. In that, we have seen as the World Bank Group that digital solutions have turned out to be very, very, very promising examples. If you can, in Pakistan there's 100 million phones. If we can kind of track transactions, digital finance, which is something that we are trying to work now with banks. For example, a model that we use in other countries is, for example, if an informal sector person comes and asks for a mortgage, what you do is you give them a smartphone in which they can kind of track their transactions, and then you give them like a compulsory saving over a year that you need to save such and such money over a year. So for 1 year, then the bank can see what their financial transactions were, what their line of business was. So that gives them kind of like a credit history, which otherwise the informal sector cannot have. So those are mechanisms that we are designing with the help of PMRC and the Ministry of Finance, and this is something that we want to kind of take forward with the task force. I think Zaidon Saab is leading the charge on this, and he has global experience as well. So I just wanted to flag that all of these things are on the government's radar. It's just a matter of coming up with mechanisms to implement it.
Then I'd like to say on behalf of Karandaaz that, of course, first of all, with the second press conference, I'm particularly happy to see Zaidon Saab there. We have a role representative, so it's been personally a great pleasure. But I think the point made by Iyaz that these recommendations and observations which have been made in this conference should go to the policymakers. And there are two ways of doing it. One is, of course, the merits of this, we can prepare a brief, which can send to Zaidon Saab perhaps who's now a linkage of the housing sector with the government. He's responsible for implementing the initiative of the Prime Minister of Housing. So this would be perhaps a good idea. Or we can directly communicate also with some agency, but I think it may be a useful idea to hand it over to you, and you can submit to the policymakers at whatever level you will consider. And so I think the efforts which have been made to put up this conference should lead to some productive use. Thank you.
As much as we'd like this discussion to go on, I'm afraid we have to break for lunch now. So I'd like to thank everybody for being here, Zaidon Saab specifically, Shamim Saab, and all our panelists. And please join us for lunch.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
very
very
much.
much.